All right, we're recording. I am going to mute everybody, and Ras, you need to then unmute yourself again and take it away.
You have reached the maximum time permitted for recording your message.
There we go. So Ras, whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Lots
Okay.
of people are saying
I
yes.
can't hear any of you, but I guess we're all muted now. Okay. Let me get this going.
All right, I can see your screen, Ras.
Good afternoon, and sorry for the delay. I'm having some problems here. Apparently, I can either use my microphone and I can't hear anything, or I can only use my speakers. But in any case, this presentation is about the first two issues of Tunisian stamps. I've exhibited these stamps for several years and have found these sources very helpful in setting the exhibit up. The article by Michael Round, which was published in the Journal of France and Colonies, Philatelic Society, UK in 1994, was very helpful and led me to the 1932 edition of the Yvert Atelier catalog, which gives an in-depth description of color varieties on these stamps. Jean Morat's self-published book on Tunisian stamps in 2000 is very helpful for stamp rates or postal rates, post offices, and postal markings. A French catalog is essential. Initially, I used the Yvert catalogs, but the Dali is even nicer. I had an email request last week from a frustrated stamp collector saying, using the Scott catalog, he couldn't distinguish between the first issue and the second issue. So I invited him to this meeting, but also responded with some hints. The stamp design was based on the Bey of Tunis's coat of arms. It was designed by Cassi, who also signed this uncatalogued essay. The first issue features, the background is plain, indicated by the red arrow. The figure in the value tablet is thin, the blue arrow, and the designer's name is engraved on the lower left margin of the stamp. That's not very clear on this side, but it's clearer on this one. Second issue features, the background is now engraved with a dotted line. The figure in the value tablet is thick. The printer Mouchon name is engraved in the right lower margin of the stamp, and Cassi is still in the left lower. Large die proofs of the first issue are shown here. There are small die proofs also, and die proofs the second issue, which I don't have. The first issue had 3 printings. July 1888 was the first, and that's this slide illustrates that printing. The tinted background and the distinguishing feature here is the gum is black. The August 1893 printing showed minor color variations, still printed on paper with black gum. November 1897 printing. This printing was done largely at the request of stamp collectors who had missed the first 2 printings. The tinted background now has a faint lined pattern horizontally, and the paper is gummed with yellowish white gum. This slide shows the horizontal lines in the background fairly clearly. And here is the difference in the 2 gums, the black and yellow gum. This is very helpful in distinguishing stamps from different printings, especially at the second issue. The second issue, the thick figure stamps, the first printing was October 1st, 1888. So although we talk about first issue and second issues, one did not replace the other. They were used concurrently. The 1888 October 1st issue was on paper with black gum. The stamp colors are the same. A 1 franc stamp has been added. All 15 centime stamps not printed on quadrilled paper come from this printing, and all 75 centime rose stamps come from this printing. Subsequent printings of the thick valued stamps have minor color variations, but the real distinguishing feature is the gum is yellowish white. In 1892, the post office changed the color of the 75 centime stamps to that of the 75 centime sage stamp, with violet on a yellowish background or orange. And similarly, they reissued the 15 centime stamp on the quadrilled paper that was being used with the sage stamp as well. The domestic rate, the internal rate in Tunisia was 15 centimes. This spawned a clandestine courier service that delivered mail internally for 10 centimes. So the Bey of Tunis lowered the rate to 10 centimes internally. This required a new 10 centime stamp. There was a large population of Italians in Tunisia, and they were paying a 25 centime foreign rate for mail to Italy. And the Bey dropped this rate to 20 centimes also, which necessitated a new stamp. To bring the stamps used on foreign mail into conformity with UPU conventions, the colors of these stamps were changed in 1899 and 1900. It's 5 centimes for circulars 10 centimes for postcards, 25 centime blue stamp for single rate letters. To avoid confusion, the 15 centime stamp was reissued in a gray color. 1901, the post office issued a 35 centime stamp for the internal single registered rate, and also added a 2 franc stamp for heavy mailings. There were only 35,000 35 centime stamps issued and 75,000 2 franc stamps. 51,000 of the 2 franc stamps were overprinted with a new value in 1908. In 1902, the remaining 15 centime blue stamps were revalued at 25 centimes. In 1907, the domestic rate dropped to 10 centimes. The 15 centime gray stamp was revalued at 10 centimes for this purpose. There was little use for the high value stamps, so the 1 franc stamps were revalued to 35 centimes. And similarly, the 2 franc to 40, which would pay a double foreign rate, and the 75 centime, the 5 franc revalued to 75 centimes for a single registered rate. All of the stamps from both issues and all printings, except the 35 centime stamp and the 2 franc stamps from the second issue, were perforated with a capital T for use as postage due stamps. The reason for the 35 centime stamp and the 2 franc stamp not being used was that they were issued after a regular postage due stamp series was issued in 1901. French catalogs recognize 3 types of the T in these stamps. Type 1 is the most common. It has 6 vertical holes and 5 horizontal holes. Type 2 only has 5 vertical and 5 horizontal holes. And type 3 has a much smaller T perforation. Type 3 are very rare. Type 2 are less common than type 1. The perforations were done in Tunis at the main post office and distributed to local post offices, as well as being produced at local post offices. Most of the type 2 stamps come from local post offices. This is the first issue, first printing thin figured stamp, type 1, with 6 vertical holes. The 1893 and 1897 printings were also perforated, but this was done for collectors, and probably most of them were done by French stamp dealers. More on that later. Second issue stamps with the type 1 perforation. This is first issue stamps with the 5 vertical hole perforations. And here are the type 3 stamps, very small T's, used briefly and only in the post offices at Gafsa and La Galette. This is the Gafsa style, and this is the La Galette style. The tool used to perforate the stamps allowed the sheets to be folded in an accordion fashion before inserting them into the tool. This resulted in Tet-Besh pairs. I've noted some people with offerings on eBay and Delicamp making a deal out of the inverted T. The numbers are roughly the same. The post office would not sell these stamps, mint stamps, to stamp dealers. Arthur Murray complained, and a postal worker said, hey, get your own perforator, gave him a source for it, and Murray started offering perforated stamps, customly perforated to the way you would like them. This results in some of these weird things here. So in 1888, the postage rates in Tunisia were the same as in the rest of France and colonies. Single domestic letter was 15 cents, single foreign 25 centimes, and registry 25 centimes. Here is a cover mailed July 20th, 1888 from Tunis to Nice. The 15 centime rate paid with the lower values of this first issue. First issue covers are very uncommon. I don't think I've seen one offered in the last 10 or 15 years. Here's another early date, July 21st, 1888, again to France, paid with the 15 centime stamp. This is an internal domestic rate from Bizerte to Tunis. 15 centime postage, 25 centime registration, paid for with a single 40 centime stamp. 40 centime stamps on cover are fairly scarce. So this is a insured letter, 300 francs, 10 centimes per 100 francs, 30 centimes, 15 centimes postage, and a 25 centime registry fee. Printed matter rates, 5 centimes paid for with the second issue stamps, 1888 printing. £5 on cover. This is a single foreign rate registered. The correct rate would be 50 centimes, 25 centimes foreign, and 25 centimes registry free. So it looks like this is overpaid by £4, 50 centimes, but a £5 stamp on cover is tough to find. There were only 4,000 printed. In 1893, the internal rate in Tunisia dropped to 10 centimes, and the foreign rate to Italy dropped to 20 centimes. The other rates remain basically the same. Here's a internal rate. Zagouan to Zagouan, using the 10 centime stamp issued in 1900. This is a internal registered rate. 10 centimes postage, 25 centimes registry fee. The AR 10 centime fee was paid and is indicated by this manuscript in the upper left corner. The 2 centime journal rate is paid for with this pair of 1 centime second issue stamps. And this one by the 2 centime second issue stamps. $15 centime stamp from the 1893 printing paid the single domestic rate to France. This is insured to France, sorry. Paid for with the 75 centime first issue stamp. That stamp on cover is also fairly uncommon. The manuscript below the stamp implies that this was overpaid and the correct rate would have been 15 centimes postage and 50 centimes insurance, or 65 centimes. This is a single rate to Italy, paid for with first issue stamps. The 5 centime stamp is from the 1897 printing. If you look closely, you should be able to see the horizontal lines in the background. 1897 stamps on cover are also quite uncommon. And here's the 5 franc second issue stamp. Registered to Germany, and again overpaid, indicated by the manuscript endorsement next to the stamp. In 1907, the rate for a single letter to France was dropped to 10 centimes. This prompted overprinting of the stamps, as I illustrated earlier. Here are the single letter rate to France paid for with the 10 centime on the 15 centime stamp. So postage due. One has to be very careful and suspicious looking at these. Most of the things I've seen offered on eBay are probably philatelic, as these are. These were mailed from Tunis, Galette, and back on April 1st, or sorry, in February of 1901. A new series of postage due stamps was coming out in April, and collectors were generating these items. So 10 centime internal rate, unpaid, 20 centimes postage due. I have seen, at least a half a dozen of these for sale on eBay. If the cost, if the postage due tax is twice the unpaid rate, odd amounts like 45 centimes would seem to be difficult to compute. However, here's a 1889 domestic rate, Tunis to Beja to Tunis. The rate is 15 centimes. If this was a double rate letter, it should have been 30 centimes. 30 centimes twice is 60 minus the 15 paid gives you 45 centimes in postage due. So I submit this is likely a legitimate cover. And that will wrap it up. Now,
Okay,
I'm going to try to switch to my speakers so I can hear you.
while you're doing that, I will mention to the listeners that and watchers that Ras is not only
I'm not hearing anything.
Ras is not only collector of Tunisia, but he's
I
also
apologize.
the vice president of the U.S. organization and the editor of our journal, which all our members realize, I'm sure, even though he can't hear me saying that. And that's going to make Q&A difficult this afternoon, too. Now we can't hear him.
Can you all hear me still?
Yes.
Okay. The question, what is known about the postal stationery? All of these stamps were printed on envelopes as well as cart letters. And I've got many of them. They aren't really uncommon.
That, that's a good idea. Since he can't hear us, use chat.
Okay, the
There we go.
chat from Marty Bratzel, who overprinted the stamps. They were done in Tunis, and there are varieties. One centime rate question.
You want to see it?
That would be nice. Sure.
And are we to assume
It's a printer with the,
1 centime mint stamps are probably made in France by Maury?
what is the rate with the printed butter and the rate of printed butter. If postcard was in this condition,
Oh, yeah.
it was considered as a printed matter.
Right.
It's a postcard printed matter rate, 1 centime, 1902.
Thanks.
According to my Dali, that's a legitimate rate. So the notation on overpaid letters indicating that the stamps were applied by the sender. French postal officials were held liable for, held responsible for overcharging customers. So it was kind of a CYA maneuver.
Self-protection for those of you who don't
There
speak
were
for your
Italian
ass.
post offices in Tunis, in Tunisia. There were three, one in Tunis, La Galette, and Sfax. Similarly, they operated until the French took over and made Tunisia a protectorate. There was also a Sardinian post. Those were quite uncommon. And the French post office operated in Tunisia as a sub post office of the one in Bonn, Algeria. If you've collected these for a while, you probably have seen letters mailed from Tunis to France with a postmark that says par Bonn, Algerie. They're fairly common.
So
I don't believe they refunded overages.
This is kind of tough when Ras can't hear us. Anybody else have a question they want to submit through chat? There we go.
And I would say a cover from Tunis to Denver, Colorado is pretty unusual. But it sounds legitimate, 4.25 centime rate. That's a really nice thing. So the T perforations, the very small type 3 T perforations, were done just for a few weeks, a few days in those two post offices. And again, as I said before, they're very rare. I would be surprised. I would not be surprised if my examples were made by Maury. The Tunis to Denver cover, could you send me a picture? That'd be really neat. Okay, for the postage due stamps, I'd say the catalog makes the mint stamps, values them higher. If you want to make sure your postage due stamp is really legitimate, you should collect them used with great big fat X's across the top. Yes, they may. The apercevoir mark is frequently there. There's also a my insufficient postage stamp, as well as the T and the, wonder if I can start this back up. Yeah. Yeah, here's this, the last cover I showed, the apercevoir marking here, the T in the triangle here, and insufficient postage stamped here. This is early 1889. According to an article I read by Robert Stone, these started disappearing, the T's and the insufficient postage. Yes.
Does anybody else have a question for Ras? All right, I'm going to let him know that I'm turning off the recording. Except I can't spell.